This is enhancing emotional intelligence. And honestly, this is one of my favorite presentations. It's one of my favorite topics to speak on because I think it's so positive and we can learn so much. So I'm really excited to share this information with you. So here's what we'll be spending our time discussing. To understand all of the components of emotional intelligence, there are four of them, and we're going to break those down. And then we're going to take emotional intelligence, or EI, those terms are interchangeable. We're going to take it from theory into day-to-day strategies. And I mentioned earlier, I am a counselor by training, so I'm a practitioner. Theory and research is amazing, but I like to apply it in a way that's going to be useful for you. So we'll be doing that as well. Also, the great thing about EQ, that's emotional quotient, taken from intelligence quotient, enhancing your EQ, we're going to learn some strategies to do that. So the good news is it's a skill. So it's something that we can learn and develop and improve upon. We're also going to explore the role of emotional intelligence in the workplace. How does that come into play, and how can we use those skills to be more effective? And also, we're going to look at how we can harness the power of EI and or your understanding of it for greater success and fulfillment. Okay, so I love this quote from Joshua Friedman. Emotional intelligence is a way of recognizing, understand, and choosing how we think, feel, and act. It shapes our interactions with others and our understanding of ourselves. I think that bears repeating. Emotional intelligence is a way of recognizing, understanding, and choosing how we think, feel, and act.
Okay,
It
so let me
shapes our
tell
interactions
you
with others
again. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye. Well, you
and our
just made me look at
understandings of
something I didn't
ourselves.
really miss. Okay, all right.
Okay, so here is the EI equation. Again, that's emotional intelligence, and you will hear EI and EQ used interchangeably as well throughout this presentation. It is a person's ability to perceive, process, and regulate emotional information accurately. And that's both within ourselves and in others. So it's our ability to perceive it, process it, and also regulate emotional information. And I love that word accurately. Okay, knowing we're human beings, that doesn't mean perfectly, but doing it with a high level of accuracy. Plus, there's that little plus sign in there. Also, using this information to act in a way that benefits ourselves and also facilitates positive relationships with others. That is EI. So you see it's a little bit of incoming. Okay, I like to see it this way. There's incoming information, and we're able to take that in and process it effectively and accurately, and then also apply said information. So there's outgoing, if you will, turn that into behavior and apply it in a way that's actually beneficial for both ourselves and our relationships. Okay, so we've got a graphic here on the right-hand side of your screen, and this is basically a crash course on emotional intelligence, if you will. I love graphics. I love things that are simple like this because it makes it really easy to understand. And so here we're talking about the interpersonal as well as the intrapersonal. Okay, so it looks at these two of the multiple intelligences. And on our graphic there, you see we've got the four quadrants. So there's managing and being aware of, and then also there's myself and others. And right here you have the four components of emotional intelligence. Okay, so they say at the bottom there, social and emotional intelligence. You can see that line there. But upper left hand, we'll start there, upper left hand corner. If I am aware, and this also pertains to myself, that's self-awareness. So having a good degree of self-awareness, very big component of emotional intelligence. Let's stay on the left-hand side because I like to start with ourselves. And then also if I'm managing that, so that can be my behavior, that can be my emotions, my reactions, but having a certain amount of self-discipline and self-management as well is on the self side. On the other side of the axis, we have others. And what are we aware of? That's having a decent amount of social awareness. We'll get into that. That's also another word you'll see for that sometimes is empathy and being able to understand and relate to another human being. kind of where they're coming from in a situation. And then down below that, also on the other side, is management, and basically relationship management. So there, in its simplest form, we're talking about some relationship skills. Okay, I love this information. Any data nuts out there? Is anybody else like me? You like data and information that way? I think this is so great. We know that on average, financially speaking, um, people with a high IQ make about $30,000 more each year than people with a lower emotional quotient. So $30,000 to me, that's a pretty big difference. So on average, people with a higher EQ make about $30,000 more each year than people with a lower one. Now remember, the good news is these are skills that we can actually increase. Also worth knowing that a single point increase in your EQ can add $1,300 to your salary. Well, what do you mean by a single point increase? We're not doing it for today's purposes. You're going to learn so much about EQ. I think you're going to feel very, very well versed in this by the end of this presentation. But there are assessments out there that you can take if you really kind of want to dig in and advance your emotional intelligence. So, but we do know a single point increase can add $1,300 to your salary. 81% of the skills that companies attribute to outstanding managers are related to emotional intelligence. So think about those four things we talked about earlier: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. You can see how, if you think about great managers or leaders you've had, you can see how those skills would definitely roll up into being an outstanding manager. So 81% of those skills that companies attribute to being an outstanding managers are related to EQ. Again, great reason to be looking into this. Also, one study of Fortune 500 companies found that salespeople with high EQ brought in twice as much money in sales as those with a below average EQ or average EQ. So those with a high EQ brought in twice as much money as those with an average or below average EQ. And then again, the great news is we all have the power to enhance our EQ. So good news there. This is absolutely a skill that can be learned and developed. Daniel Goleman is considered the father of this thing we call emotional intelligence. He actually wrote a book called, with that title, about, I want to say 27 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. So we're coming up on almost 30 years on this research. He started looking at why do people that don't necessarily have the highest IQs, they didn't necessarily graduate from the most prestigious high schools, colleges. They don't necessarily have what we see the usual markings of intelligence, like IQ. Why are they so successful? He started this research and started to dig into this. So here's one of the things he said. If you don't have self-awareness, if you are not able to manage your distressing emotions, if you can't have empathy and have effective relationships, then no matter how smart you are not going to get very far. And in that, here in this quote, you hear actually all four components of emotional intelligence that he pulled out. Back to my early career when I was actually still in graduate school, he actually came to our community and spoke on emotional intelligence and the research he was doing. And his book, this was just a little bit before his book came out. So I feel it was, for me, just groundbreaking information to have at the time that I did. So Daniel Goleman is a great name to know in the field of emotional intelligence. And also there are others. You're going to see some other authors and researchers throughout this presentation that have taken his research and taken it further. But Daniel Goleman is still alive and well. He's still out there. He's posting on social. He's doing a lot of information and research around this topic as well. So great name to know. We also know that emotional intelligence literally affects everything. It impacts your performance and your success. It can impact your physical health, which also is related to your mental health. It impacts your relationships and it impacts your happiness. And with that, I say "are" because I certainly live this as well. So as you can see, these things are actually all interconnected. And if we're struggling in one area, it's certainly going to impact us in these other areas. All right, so when it comes to emotional intelligence and happiness, We know from research that over 50% of happiness is associated with EI competencies. So that includes empathic perspective taking. I'm going to break these down a little bit further. Our self-monitoring and coping skills, greater cooperation with our partners and relationship satisfaction, and self-actualization. So we'll start with that one. So like my feeling of, you know what? I'm doing what I need to be doing. I'm pretty effective at what I do. I feel like I'm where I need to be when I need to be there. Life isn't perfect, but life is very good. So that tends to be what self-actualization looks like. I'm growing, I'm moving in the direction that I want to be. And so 50% of happiness is associated with those competencies. Also, it includes greater cooperation with my partners, with relationship satisfaction. And by partners, we mean that, of course, intimate partners, family members. That could be as well business partners or team members. But I just get along with human beings better. Because I do have that social awareness and that ability to manage relationships better. Also, more self-monitoring and more coping skills on my part. Maybe when I understand myself better, I'm less likely to get a hot button hit, if you will, or get blindsided by someone else's comment or statement. Less likely to say something that I need to pull my foot out of my mouth later on. So I just have better coping skills. I'm better able to kind of take a beat and respond to things the way that I want to. And then finally, empathic perspective taking. Boy, that's a mouthful, isn't it, of psychobabble? Um, that is actually being able to kind of take a step back. And rather than just being frustrated, especially like when there's a rub with someone, right? When things just are maybe, we're locking horns a little bit or not seeing eye to eye, that's the ability to take a step back and say, okay, wait a minute, what's going on here? There's probably a reason why this individual is acting the way that they do or saying the things that they are. One of my trainers called this, especially when it's someone that you disagree with or their point of view is something that you disagree with, be their defense attorney. Okay. Can you imagine someone that disagrees with you taking a position, a very strong position on something that you disagree with, but also holding the perspective that there must be a reason. Like there's a reason why I hold my beliefs, because I think that's the right perspective with the information I have. But it's taking the perspective that there must be a reason why they hold the beliefs that they do. Let's find out what those are to the extent, being curious enough to the extent that I could maybe even be their defense attorney if I needed to. So that is high level stuff. But you can see how our happiness would be related to that. If I'm able to take a beat and see where they're coming from, I'm going to have less distress in my relationships, and other good things are going to flow from there. Okay, quick pause here for a sip for me and any questions in the chat for you. We'll check in to see if we have any questions, and then we're going to keep going. Want to make sure everybody's doing well so far. Okay, how are we doing? Do we have any questions in the chat?
No questions.
Okay, all right. No news is good news. We'll go ahead and keep going, but if you do have a question, feel free to type that in at any point. Here again is our crash course on emotional intelligence. These are the big four characteristics and skills that roll up into emotional intelligence. The first is self-awareness. So that's the ability to recognize and understand one's own triggers, motivators, and emotions and their impact on others. And I can tell you, after being a therapist for 27 years, I feel like this is one in which we can always improve, and we truly never arrive. So we will maybe never be
All right, I'm gonna call you after that.
100%
I had
there
to.
when it comes to the self-awareness. So self-awareness there is that ability to recognize and understand our own triggers, motivators, and emotions and their impact on others. Self-regulation then is the ability to manage our own negative or disruptive emotions. And guess what? We're human. We all have emotions. And by the way, emotions, I want to really stress, are morally free. By that, our emotions are actually there to serve us. They're there to inform us. They can give us energy. They can slow us down sometimes when we need to slow down. So technically, there aren't any good or bad emotions, if you will, But certainly at certain times, they can kind of crash in when we don't want them to, or it might be not an emotion I want to experience right now, or an emotion like, let's say, anger can be applied in a way that's going to be destructive. So it's not that emotions are good or bad, it's actually how we apply them in a situation. So, and to me, that's a great step in self regulation, also, is just recognizing that. My boys are adults now and they've got children of their own, but one of the things that we would raise them with is it's okay to be mad, it's not okay to be mean. And so that was the self-regulation piece that we really wanted to teach them. It's really okay to be angry. Things are going to happen that cause upset. But if we take it into our behavior of being mean to, let's say in our case, your brother, that's not okay. So what can we do instead? And that's that second part of self-regulation, is adapt to changes in circumstances. So manage those negative or disruptive emotions. They're going to happen. They're going to come. Understanding that and then adapting to those changes in our circumstances. Next up is empathy. And that's our ability to recognize how others are feeling and consider those feelings before responding in social situations. Again, this is one that I don't know if we ever 100% arrive. I think that there's a continuum of, maybe I've just learned this, or maybe my life exposure over the years. Maybe I have had loss early in life. I've lost a loved one. Sometimes that can increase our capacity for empathy, not things we would sign up for, but we do find those often being results when we've had losses early in life. But empathy, again, is a skill that we can actually grow. So it is the ability to recognize how others are feeling and just basically think about those. And by the way, it's not mind reading. It's not saying I know how you feel or being able to just absolutely understand. Sometimes it involves just being curious and asking thoughtful questions about, oh, can you tell me what that is like or what that's been like for you? And then finally, we have social awareness. So that's the ability to connect with others through skills such as active listening, verbal and nonverbal communication, kind of watching for body language as well. Reading between the lines, if you again, not mind reading, but kind of hearing what's said and also hearing what's not said and asking some of those questions. Kind of a current colloquial term for this, if you will, is read the room, right? So kind of pick up a sense in the room. Is the energy awkward? Are there uncomfortable glances going around? But the ability to just notice those things, kind of slow down. If you've heard of mindfulness, that's not technically an EQ skill, but I do believe it rolls up in that. And mindfulness is just basically being in the moment and observing what's going on with us both internally and then what's going on around us non-judgmentally. So just observing non-judgmentally, not feeling like we should feel a certain way or somebody else should be acting a certain way, but just basically noticing what's going on. So there you have it, your crash course, the four components: self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, and social awareness. Okay, so our skill number one, then, we're going to go through these a little bit deeper now. So we're just going to take them one at a time through these four skills. Our first one is self-awareness. And it really is true that we do think, feel, act. Okay, so we want to tune into our thoughts and feelings and without judgment, like I mentioned earlier, and just ask yourself, what triggered this emotion or behavior? Did something happen right before this that kind of set me up for this? And then what are the thoughts attached to it? And are any of my reactions rooted in something from my past? Okay. And also, we want to notice how emotions may manifest in other ways. In other words, am I having physical sensations in my stomach, my throat, or my chest? Maybe even like, your muscles around your neck or in your shoulders. Am I having any tension there? Our body will tell us in other ways that something's up. Headaches along those lines, maybe some nausea even. Also, subtle facial expressions or body language. My husband is particularly good. As much as I can try to not react sometimes and just take a beat, he'll catch an eyebrow raise on me faster than anybody else. He's like, the eyebrows up, what's going on? So we do have kind of some of those tells, right, that our family members can call out, especially when they know those things about us. So watch how those physical or how those emotions might manifest in other ways also. So again, without feeling or judgment, sometimes I'll hear people say, I know I shouldn't be feeling this way, but it's like, wait, back up. How about I am feeling this way, and why is that? What's going on? Is there something that happened that triggered this emotion or behavior? And then am I attaching some thoughts to it? So think, feel, act. Again, how we think, what those thoughts are actually going to set up the feelings, and then a lot of times that's going to set up our actions or our behavior. One of my trainers taught me to, when I'm just feeling off or not feeling maybe the way that I want to use HALT. And this is not in the presentation, so I just want to give you this, which stands for, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? So again, that's HALT. If I'm feeling off or just not feeling myself or my energy's down, I just, ugh. Just to do a HALT, which means stop, right? That's another word for stop. And ask myself, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? A lot of times, there's a good chance it's one or more of those four things. And some of those things I can do something about right away, right? Can I grab a little snack if I'm hungry? If I'm angry, can I kind of jot down some notes right now at least and kind of look at that? Okay, this is still apparently getting to me. Am I lonely? Do I need to connect with a friend? Or am I tired? Maybe I need to kind of make some plans to get to bed a little bit earlier if I can, or get some rest. So we're not judging our emotions. We're acknowledging our emotions and using those for information. So that's self-awareness. Have you heard of the amygdala hijacking? This actually also was explored very well in Daniel Goleman's research. The amygdala is a little almond-shaped gland basically in the brain. And it does control our emotions, and actually a lot of our sensory input in the brain comes through this. Okay, so the amygdala wants to make sure that we're safe. It likes to make sure that we're included in the group. We're talking like primal kind of like lizard kind of stuff, right? If you've heard of the lizard brain or the reptile brain, this is what we're talking about here. We like what's comfortable. We like to be in control of ourselves and situations as much as possible. All of that stimuli comes through the amygdala. Okay. And if the amygdala says, nope, I don't feel safe, I don't feel protected, I feel out of control, I feel like this is an unfamiliar situation, that's what we call an amygdala hijacking. So basically, there's a shorter distance in the brain to have an emotional reaction by the amygdala saying, nope, don't feel safe. And that's where we get into fight, flight, or freeze. So there's a shorter reaction there to have that reaction than there is to have that really well thought out, like reasonable, logical reaction. Okay, this is the kind of thing that helps us protect ourselves when our safety is threatened, right? We just kind of go into, automatic mode. This is what helps moms lift small cars off their children, helps us pull people out of emergency situations. So logic goes out the window. It's all react, 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 fight, flight, or freeze. So now you know about the amygdala. You've had your neuropsychology lesson for the day. So that's self-awareness, basically being aware of what's going on and knowing I do have a part of my physical body that wants to keep me safe and alive and well and protected and included with my family or my group that can actually do a hijacking. So we can learn how to respond. Don't worry, we're going to get to those skills in a little bit. Number two, EI skill number 2 is self-regulation. One way that we can do this or be better at this is make a list of your triggers. What are things that like pet peeves? What are things that kind of get my goat? What are things that make me more likely maybe to make an unprofessional response or something that I might need to go back and apologize for, clean up later? What are those things? Is it someone saying certain things to me? Is it me being overtired? I know for me, my fuse can get a little bit shorter when I don't get enough sleep. Is it certain stressors in my life? What are those things that can be triggers for me? We all have different ones. That's non-judgmental, but what are things that can kind of get my goat? Tune in regularly to your feelings then. Okay, how am I feeling? Doing all right? Again, that's that mindfulness is what we're talking about here. Make self-care a priority. That truly is not being selfish. That's something we can do that goes a long way to, I like to call it, build insulation around us to help us just do well and function well. And then part of self-care is building proactive stress management into the day. when I'm working with a client for the first time, I like to ask them about two things. And one is what I like to call the fire drill, if you will. And we do fire drills from time to time so that we know how to safely get out of burning buildings. And so, what are your fire drill activities? What are the things that you do from time to time on an ongoing basis to just keep your head above water, emotionally speaking, make sure you're okay? That could be exercise, that could be intentional, repeated mindfulness practices. It might be deep breathing, other relaxation techniques. It might be reading. It might be spending time with my dog. But what are proactive things that you do that you make sure you include from time to time? So those are fire drill activities. And then there are also fire escape activities, okay? Those are things that I like to see. What do my clients have in their back pocket that they can do when it's needed? Okay, I mentioned hungry, angry, lonely, or tired to you earlier. Halt. Do I have healthy snacks on hand if I need kind of that mid-afternoon boost? Do I have friends that I can call or family members at 2 in the morning if I need them? Do I have some of those things that, like, when life gets cooking, do I have some of those things that I can do right away when I need them? So we need to have both of those. What are ongoing things that I'm doing, proactively speaking? And then those fire escape things. What are things that I can do on a moment's notice when I just kind of need to take a step back? That might be just get out, take a walk around the building, get up, move away from my desk or move away from my work area. But what are things that I can do to kind of hit the reset button when I need them? So that's self-regulation. Skill number 3 is empathy. Again, this is one that we can all grow in if it doesn't come naturally. And one of the things we can do is practice active listening. And this is something we've all heard about, but really just making sure that we are dialed in and putting our focus on that person. So that might mean closing the screen, right? Turning the phone over, not looking at the phone, actually really dialing in and listening to what they have to say, and also listening between the words. Give them time to take a pause, catch a breath, especially if they're sharing something that's maybe uncomfortable or new for them. So pay attention to those nonverbal clues as well, and then be able to just reflect and clarify. And this, by the way, one of my trainers called this using Burger King language or drive-through language, if you will. So you know how you give them your order, you say you want a Whopper, fries, and a medium drink, and they'll say back to you, okay, so that was a Whopper, fries, and a medium drink with no onions, right? And you're like, no, I wanted the onions. That was just a Whopper, fries, and medium drink. They're making sure that they got your order right. And sometimes it still isn't right. Same thing goes in communication. Our language is so complex that just when you're really listening, and it is great empathy to just listen and say, okay, and even if they're like rattling on and on and on, you can say, okay, time out just a second. Let me make sure I got this straight. It sounds like you're frustrated with. Is that right? Am I hearing that right? And even if I don't agree with them, but I'm just saying, let me make sure I've heard you correctly so far. And I like to add, when I do that, I like to add an is that right to the equation to make sure that I am hearing them correctly. And it gives them an opportunity to say, yep, that is it. Or it gives them a chance to say, well, sort of, but it's actually more like this. And I know when I've had people in my life that do this with me, it actually really helps me clarify my own thinking. And sometimes I'm like, oh, when they reflect it back, so do you mean this? And I'm like, I can see how it came across that way. I totally see that, but actually, this is what I meant. So that is great empathy. It's really about supporting the time and the space to let another human being process what they're thinking and feeling non-judgmentally, of course. And then also seeking to understand as opposed to influencing or agreeing. We absolutely do not have to agree with someone in order to understand where they're coming from. So again, be their defense attorney. Just understand where they're coming from in to the extent that you could argue for them, even if you needed to. And then finally, we're just acknowledge and validating. We're not pitying them. So this isn't sympathy. That's different. I feel so sorry for you. It's just really about kind of understanding what is it like for them at that time. And then finally, we're on to skill number 4, which is social awareness. This classic quote from Maya Angelou, maybe you've heard it before. I love this one. She says, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And so this is that piece of how do we relate with others in our environment. And it involves things like this, setting boundaries and also respecting boundaries. So setting boundaries for ourselves, making sure that we're not over promising or under delivering, just making sure that we're also setting boundaries to protect our time, protect our energy, but then also respecting the boundaries of others that when they need that. My children right now are raising toddlers. So we have 1-year-olds and 3-year-olds around. And one of the things they'll talk about, including not only with their friends or with their siblings, but they'll talk about with the dogs even, that so and so needs space. So Wrigley, the dog, needs space right now. Sometimes the dog does need space, or your brother needs space. And so the kids are learning at a very young age how to respect the boundaries and the needs of others. Also, in our communication, we can seek to be assertive versus aggressive. Assertive is giving that person all of the information that they need in a way that's respectful and also not going to incite defensiveness in the other party. So I'm making sure that if I'm going to give you information, especially when it involves our relationship or changing something, I'm going to give you all the information that you need so that you can make an informed choice. Rather than being aggressive, which more becomes more about the show and my emotion rather than the message there. Want to monitor our facial expressions and body language. Again, and this can go both from an empathy perspective and also how I share information. I mentioned my eyebrow tell to you, but we want to make sure that our body language and facial expressions are consistent with our message. And also just practicing effective communication. The great thing here is we can develop these skills as well. We can grow these. A lot of times I find when I've had clients or even myself when I've engaged in or been tempted to engage in passive aggressive behavior, nobody likes that, right? That just doesn't feel good. But what I find is when people engage in passive aggressive behavior more often than others, a lot of times what it is there's a lack of assertive communication skills. So when they learn some skills, that can actually help them a great deal. Sometimes too, they don't feel safe in that situation, communicating openly and honestly and building that trust and respect. Maybe there has been a trust violation of some point, but assertive communication can go a long ways. And then also very, very true here as well. One of the things that we do teach in conflict management is assertive communication. So learn to see conflict as an opportunity to grow closer, an opportunity to understand each other better. Oftentimes we haven't crossed these roads before. We don't know until we're across the table from someone in a conflict or we're beside each other in a conflict and we're dealing with a problem situation. But see, this is an opportunity to grow and learn. So many of our inventions in this country are the result of difficulties. So conflict really is an opportunity. And also, actions speak louder than words. Keep that in mind. Perhaps you've heard the statistic that when it comes to verbal and nonverbal communication, only 7% of our communication is actually verbal, and 93% is nonverbal. On that note, then it's no surprise that if there's a disconnect, perceptively speaking, between my verbal communication, what my words are saying, and what my nonverbals are showing, listeners are going to err on the side of the nonverbals every time. Okay, so here's a little case study we'll go through real quick. Emotional intelligence in action. Employee A gets into a fight with their partner before leaving the house for work. They're running late, so they don't they don't eat anything, and they're irritated by the time they get breakfast or have coffee, right? So they didn't eat at home. Then there's traffic, so they're late to work, and the moment they arrive, their colleague asks for help with something. All right, maybe you've been there before. I know I have. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So here we're talking about, I'm going to back this up. We're talking about emotional awareness, right? We're talking about self-awareness right here. Knowing I'm going into this, I might be a little bit wound up given a morning like this. Okay. Here's another one. Employee B has a call with a colleague to discuss a challenging situation. Employee B has a strong opinion on what the next best steps are and has already played out how this conversation will go in their mind, including what their colleague will say. Ooh. Okay, so this might go well, or this could potentially be a setup. Okay, and you can see how emotional intelligence in action is going to be very useful here. If employee B, it's good to kind of think about, okay, how might my colleague respond? Um, but we want to make sure that we're not doing that mind reading thing and kind of putting the situation on rails, because that can actually set us up to respond poorly. And you can see how a little empathy, making sure we're doing some active listening, making sure we've got awareness of our own opinion and how are we doing with that. Here you see where EI in action, where having some skills can go a long way to help this situation out. Okay, you get a bonus here. I mentioned halt when we're feeling like things are off. Here's another one that can really help us in situations, and it's called the stop technique. So a few times a day, and this is literally something we can do proactively, whether we're feeling great, whether we're feeling a little off, maybe I'm feeling 70%, maybe I'm feeling 90%, maybe I'm feeling 20%, but practice stopping. Okay, and this one is another acronym, but stop what you're doing. Okay, literally stop, take a few deep breaths, observe your thoughts and physical sensations. Okay, how am I doing? Like right now, it's cold in this room that I'm in. Okay, so I'm feeling a little bit chilly. What am I thinking about? And then proceed with mindful intention. And this basically is bare bones, very simple, very practical mindfulness practice. So a few times a day, just practice stopping. Stop what you're doing, take a few deep breaths, observe your thoughts and your physical situation or sensations. How am I doing? And proceed with mindful intention. This is the reset that can make a huge difference in how our day goes overall. Okay, what I'd ask you to do here is explore your current IQ, and just kind of give yourself a yes or a no, a true or false on any of these. No one's going to ask about your results, but it's just a chance to kind of look a little bit at how am I doing. Maybe you've not been presented with this information before. So true or false on all of these, or you can give yourself a 1 or a 0 on all of these, however you think best. But true or false, my emotions strongly impact my behavior. When under pressure, my behavior can change. I'm generally averse to change in new people. I sometimes find obstacles and setbacks overwhelming. By the way, again, keep in mind, EQ is on a continuum, okay? So we might be stronger in some of these and not as likely in others of these. I have a tendency to lose my temper when I'm challenged. Difficult to move on after a setback. I find it difficult to build relationships with new people. And I tend to avoid conflict at all costs. Now, I'm guessing you might assume from our presentation thus far that if you gave yourself a number or if you gave yourself a true for these, the higher number of trues or actual numbers that you have is going to show opportunities, okay, for improvement. And again, keep in mind, EQ is not a fixed number. It can be developed like any muscle. So if you see some of these yourselves, and by the way, if you're going through a stressful season or life just does feel overwhelming right now, or maybe there has been a massive change in your life, believe me, we're human beings and our quotient on these is going to be higher, right? Our likelihood to react in these ways is going to be higher. So I like to say no beating up on ourselves for where we're at. It's really just about having that awareness. This is part of EQ, is having that self-awareness and knowing, okay, as I look at these, if some of these are higher than I want them to be, where would I get the most return on my investment for just making a change in one of these and just developing some skills in one of these areas? You can go a long ways just by learning one, developing one, and then knock down other dominoes later. Okay, so how do we do that? Here's some tips kind of in summary. You can build your EQ muscle like we talked about. Just take time once in a while to tune into your feelings and your thoughts, and especially if you're feeling off. What's going on with that? That's where halt comes in. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? Okay. What do I need here? But tune into your feelings and thoughts. They're not right or wrong. They're not good or bad. They're there to serve you for a reason. Now, that said, do I have some thoughts that are non-productive? By those, that might be things like, oh, I always mess things up, or oh, nobody likes me, or oh, I'm always excluded. By the way, do you hear some of those always and nevers in there, those absolutes? A lot of times those are non-productive because rarely is life that absolute. So I want to kind of reframe those. Like, you know what? Yeah, I did mess up this time, but that doesn't mean I can't improve and do it better next time. That's what we call a reframe. Take the good out of it, look for that, look how we can build upon that. That is not unicorns and rainbows, but if I've got a non-productive thought that's just going to kind of get me mired and stuck and stressed out and frustrated, it's going to drain my energy, those can and need to be reframed. So how can I take the good out of that? By the way, employee assistance is amazing at helping you with things like this, so there's a plug there. But do I have some thoughts that are not serving me well? Okay, they're there for a reason, but what can I take out of that to improve? We talked about making self-care a priority. And also, it's okay. I think it's important to identify and ask for what you need. What is that? Don't be afraid to ask. They're adults. It's okay for them to tell you no or I can't right now. But I think a lot of us could go a long way in being better about asking for what we need. Also, asking for feedback is important, um, making sure that we're doing a good job. So be able to ask for feedback, and hear that in a way that's going to help us, pardon me, improve our performance. Tuning into the needs and emotions of others, there's that empathy piece right there, and putting our own preconceived ideas to the side. We do see the world from our perspective, and we may or may not have the perspective that that other person does looking at it from the other direction. So we need to have that ability to put our preconceived ideas on the shelf until we learn more of where the other person is coming from. We can do this by practicing active listening that we talked about earlier, and also, like you're doing right now, seeking to continuously learn and grow. Okay, so here are some helpful resources for you if you want to learn more about this. I mentioned the book Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. I'm peeking at my bookshelf right now, and I don't think I have it on my shelf. But again, one of my favorite books when it comes to this, really the father of emotional intelligence. He also has a podcast, and I do believe he's on LinkedIn as well. Emotional Intelligence 2.0 by Travis Bradberry and Jean Greaves. That book actually has an assessment that comes with it. So it's a smaller book, it's an easy, quick read. And it has, like I said, that assessment, and it breaks down these 4 characteristics as well. Daniel Goleman also wrote a book on leadership. So if you want to look into how can we apply these skills in a leadership role, he's taken that, and that's his book Primal Leadership, which is much newer. And then also, there's the Stress and Anxiety Companion app, and PositivePsychology.com has some great stuff, as well as Inc.com did an article on 15 websites that will heighten your EI. Isn't that fun? So all of this is available for you in addition to your Employee Assistance Program, BHS, that can help you with this information as well. My time in EAP has taught me that there are absolutely no dumb questions. In fact, I think there's too much information out there. So know that your EAP is there and available to help you, like, get the information that you need. We're in the business of bettering lives, so employees bring their best selves to work. So on that note, I want to show you the contact information for the Employee Assistance Program. But we have about 5 minutes remaining in our time together, and I want to open it up for any questions whatsoever. We can circle back or touch on anything that you want to know a little bit more about.
Yes, this is Marquita. I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, this was very good information. But I had a question when I was looking at the chart. So I don't know what they will call if I'm very passionate, things that I believe in or things that I strongly yeah, believe in. If I'm
Hmm.
having a conversation with someone, I may
Hmm.
get I may come off well, people say I come off aggressive or my tone do change, but really, and they may take it as me being upset, and really I'm not upset. It's just that when I'm passionate about something or I'm in conversation with someone, um
Hmm.
my tone may do change, and it comes off as aggressiveness, but it's not. To me, it's passionate, and I always get very, not defensive, but I just, when I believe in something and I have a conversation, sometimes with people, they say,
Hmm.
like I said, they take it as me being aggressive, and I don't.
Okay, wow. Okay, so that's some good feedback that you've gotten, right? Um,
Yes.
yes, because it's I hear that coming through with you. You don't mean it to come across as aggressive at all.
Mm-mm.
But good to know that it does, or that it could. You've gotten that good feedback, so
But it's
that's good
only
to
when
know.
it's only when it's something that I'm very passionate in, and like I said, something that I strongly believe in, and me and another person maybe having a conversation or a debate, they perceive me as being aggressive because, because my tone change, or because I do get a little loud when expressing that.
Hmm.
But again, I only do that in conversation with things that, like I said, I strongly believe in, or in defense of something.
Sure,
So I don't
sure.
know what that would be called, to maybe I can do to help me trying to get my point across without the tone and people taking it in a way of me being aggressive.
Okay, sure. Can I offer you a couple of thoughts there? Would that be helpful?
Hmm.
Mhm. Okay. And again, that's great self-awareness, great feedback you've been given. So it's self-awareness right there is one of our components. And I think what you're asking about is kind of the social awareness piece, or like the relationship management piece. I would recommend a couple of things. And one is, if you're going to be working closely or spending time closely with someone, I would give them the heads up and say, hey, just want to let you know this about me. I get pretty excited about things. It's only something that I'm passionate about, but I've been given the feedback and I'm working on it. But I've been given the feedback that when I get really wound up about something, I might even come across as aggressive. So don't be afraid to tell me that. Like, whoa, 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 back up just a minute, and let me know. So just tell people, kind of give them a heads up. I actually had a colleague do that with me years ago. We were in her car and we were going to get a Diet Coke someplace, and I was just getting to know her. I was an intern, and she tied it back to her heritage. And so this is what she said to me. And it was just such great. I share this example quite a bit, because she says, by the way, I just want to let you know. And she says, I'm Italian. And we get really excited about things, and we can get really passionate about things and wound up. And she says, I'm probably going to scare you because you seem kind of quiet. I was an intern, right? I was in over my head at that point. She said, I just want to let you know this about me. And it's always totally okay for you to say to me, whoa, is everything okay? Or, just kind of, she says, I'll dial it back, but sometimes we can just be off to the races. So one good thing is to give a heads up.
Hmm.
And then another thing that we can do is, and all of us can do this, no matter what we do for a living or kind of where we're at, is learn more assertive communication skills. How can I communicate what really matters to me in a way where I'm packaging it as such that my message is getting through, and maybe less of the emotion. So, and assertive communication skills will teach us those things. So how can
Okay.
my message be less emotional and more logical, if you will? Not that it's illogical, I'm not saying that, but
Hmm.
assertive communication skills can teach us how to package it differently.
Okay.
Great question. Thank you. Did
Thank.
that answer your question?
Yes. Yes. Thank
Awesome.
you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Well,
No other
hearing none.
questions from anybody? Jamie, I don't have any questions, but I did just want to thank you. I love this topic. I think emotional intelligence is so important, just to have an understanding and a self-awareness as well. So I was really excited about this topic today, so thank you. And for everyone here, we will post a video on my FYI, as well as we'll have copies of the slides available as well.
Okay. Great. That's good.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having us and having this conversation. I love this topic as well, like I mentioned, so we have that in common. And yes, thank you for your patience with like technology issues that we fought through together. And hopefully this is helpful, especially going into the holidays. So yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate your time and attention, the opportunity to walk with you through this.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, everyone, for joining.